George Ellis recently wrote a paper pointing out the fact that multiverse advocates do not have any experimental evidence validating their claims for the various forms of multiverse theories that they have postulated over the last few decades or so. Moreover, not only do atheists not have any experimental evidence validating their claims for multiverses, there's actually fairly strong experimental evidence that can be mustered against their claims for multiverses. But before we get into that, what is particularly interesting about George Ellis criticizing these various evidence-free multiverse scenarios is that it was George Ellis himself who, almost 50 years ago, along with Stephen Hawking and Roger Penrose, extended general relativity to prove that time and space had a finite beginning that corresponded to the origin of matter and energy. Prior to this development by Ellis, Hawking, and Penrose, as well as prior to the discovery of the cosmic microwave background and the discovery of other evidences, scientists by and large had assumed that the universe had always existed and was infinite in size. Finding that the universe had a beginning was unexpected and unwelcome by many scientists. As Robert Jastrow commented, "For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries." Albert Einstein himself found the notion of a beginning for the universe to be irritating and senseless. In fact, Einstein's self-admitted biggest blunder of his life was when he added a cosmological constant to general relativity to reflect a static universe that had always existed. As well, author Stanley Eddington stated that the notion of a beginning of the present order of nature is repugnant to me. In fact, the term Big Bang itself was coined by Fred Hoyle as a term of derision against the notion of a beginning for the universe. Yet, despite the overt philosophical bias that many prominent scientists have had, and apparently still have, against the universe having a beginning, the scientific evidence that the entire universe, all space, time, matter, and energy of the universe started at the Big Bang is now very well established. But what I find interesting in all the current multiverse scenarios postulated by atheists is that if you scratch on the surface of any of their multiverse scenarios, you will find not any compelling evidence for a multiverse, as George Ellis pointed out, but you will instead find a random infinity that was conjectured in the imagination of the atheist, and an imagined random infinity that was conjectured by them for the sole purpose of them to try to get back to some type of belief that the universe itself is infinite in some way, shape, or form, and so as to apparently continue to try to avoid any inference to God. Robert Sheldon comments that multiverse theory is designed for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to defend atheism. It makes no predictions, it gives no insight, it provides no control, it produces no technology, it advances no mathematics. It is a science in name only, because it is really metaphysics. In fact, much like Darwinian evolution is an unfalsifiable pseudoscience that is based on unrestrained imagination and bad liberal theology, as this video shows, these multiverse theories are also unfalsifiable pseudosciences that are found to be based on unrestrained imagination and bad liberal theology. As John Horgan states, these multiverse theories all share the same fundamental defect. They can be neither confirmed nor falsified. Hence, they don't deserve to be called scientific, according to the well-known criterion proposed by the philosopher Karl Popper. Some defenders of multiverses and strings mock skeptics who raise the issue of falsification as paparazzi, which is cute, but not a counter-argument. Multiverse theories aren't theories. They're science fictions, theologies, works of imagination, unconstrained by evidence. Max Tegmark, in an article entitled Parallel Universes, offers an overview of 4 different kinds of multiverse theories that have been postulated by atheists. We find in Tegmark's Level 1 multiverse that the Level 1 multiverse is simply a region of space of this universe that is too far away for us to have seen yet. Tegmark speculates that this unobserved part of the universe may be infinite and may therefore contain an infinite number of parallel universes. The main evidence that Tegmark puts forth for postulating that the space of the universe may be infinite seems to be the fact that the universe is not closed. Or more precisely, the universe does not have a positive convex topology. Specifically, he states that space could be finite if it has a convex curvature. Yet the topology of the universe is not negative and open, and therefore infinite, as Tegmark had apparently presupposed. In fact, the topology of the universe is now found to be the least likely of all topologies, absolute flatness. John Gribben commented that finding the universe in a state of even approximate flatness today is even less likely than finding a perfectly sharpened pencil balancing on its point for millions of years. Any deviation of the universe from flatness in the Big Bang would have grown, and grown markedly, as the universe expanded and aged. Moreover, by analyzing the tiny variations in the temperature of the background radiation, which is exactly what Tegmark was trying to do in his 2003 multiverse paper, researchers have now found that these tiny temperature variations correspond to the largest scale structures of the observable universe. A region that was a fraction of a degree warmer became a vast galaxy cluster, hundreds of millions of light years across. The researchers then go on to state, if the universe was curved in any way, these temperature variations would appear distorted compared to the actual size that we see these structures today. Our best scientific instruments can't detect any distortion at all between the tiny temperature variations in the microwave background and the largest scale structures of the observable universe. As well, the researchers go on to state that the universe must have been flat to 1 part within 1 to the 10 to the 57 parts over its entire 13.8 billion years of expansion. And in regards to Tegmark's claim that the universe is infinite, they state, the biggest thing about the universe being flat is what it doesn't tell us. We still don't know if the universe is finite or infinite. Thus, Tegmark has exactly 0 empirical evidence substantiating his belief that the universe must be infinite in size and contain an infinite number of parallel universes. The best that Tegmark can claim from the evidence we now have is that we cannot yet rule out an infinitely large universe completely, whereas the theist, on the other hand, with the 1 part in 1 to the 10 to the 57 parts finding for the flatness of the universe, can claim another fairly incredible piece of evidence for the fine-tuning of the universe. As the following author commented, there are no laws of physics that predict or restrict the topology of the universe to be flat. In fact, under atheistic naturalism, there is no reason why any of the constants or laws of physics should remain constant. As the following astronomer noted, there is absolutely no reason these constants should be constant. And yet, despite the laws of physics failing to predict a flat universe, on the other hand, thousands of years ago, long before modern science came along, the Bible spoke of God stretching a measuring line to mark off the dimensions of the Earth's foundations. It is also interesting to note that the observations for temperature variations in the microwave background that disconfirmed Tegmark's claim that the universe must be open and infinite have instead now confirmed, as Tegmark himself reluctantly admits in the following video, that the Earth and solar system have a surprisingly special position within the universe in regards to some of the unexpected anomalies that are now found within the temperature variations of the microwave background. This stunning confession by Tegmark is in the preceding videos all the more interesting since Tegmark's area of expertise is developing and implementing the most effective techniques for analyzing rich data sets, such as those produced by the Sloan Digital Sky Survey. Tegmark also stated that the Level 1 multiverse sounds trivially obvious, and then asked, how could space not be infinite? Now, I don't know if Tegmark was being purposely vague and misleading so as to make his Level 1 multiverse seem more plausible, yet in the very article that Tegmark himself cited after asking the question, how could space not be infinite, the answer is given for how space may not be infinite. Simply put, the four-dimensional space-time of general relativity itself resolved an age-old conundrum that had stumped Aristotle and others of the universe needing an edge, and showed us how space can be finite yet have no problematic boundary. In fact, if Tegmark would have wondered why higher dimensional mathematics had to be developed before Einstein could elucidate general relativity, or before quantum mechanics could be elucidated, instead of trying to figure out how figure out a way how to sneak an infinite universe back into the scheme of things, then perhaps Tegmark would have realized that this entire universe continues to be sustained from a higher dimension. Here's a video that makes that point clear. Moreover, perhaps Tegmark would have also realized that the higher dimensional mathematics that undergird the two theories of relativity in particular also gives us fairly compelling evidence for a higher heavenly dimension and for a hellish dimension, just as Christians have claimed existed all along. Here is a video that makes that point clear. In fact, despite Tegmark and other atheists apparently failing to take the four-dimensional space-time of general relativity seriously enough, it has now been shown, to repeat myself, that every solution to the equations of general relativity guarantees the existence of a singular boundary for space and time in the past. As well, general relativity also now shows us that space-time ceases to exist at the singularity of black holes. Thus, contrary to what Tegmark was trying to imply, four-dimensional space-time having an unexpected boundary within general relativity seems to be a rather common, even a surprising, feature of general relativity that pops up from time to time. In his Multiverse article, Max Tegmark then goes on to imagine a level 2 multiverse. A level 2 multiverse arises as a consequence of the theory of cosmological inflation. The initial purpose of cosmological inflation was to try to explain why the universe is surprisingly flat and so smoothly distributed or homogeneous. Yet Paul Steinhardt of Princeton University, who helped develop inflationary theory but is now scathing of it, states that the idea that inflationary theory produces any observable predictions at all is based on a simplification of the theory that simply does not hold true. The deeper problem is that once inflation starts, it doesn't end the way these simplistic calculations suggest. He says, instead, due to quantum physics, it leads to a multiverse where the universe breaks up into an infinite number of patches. These patches explore all conceivable properties as you go from patch to patch. So that means it doesn't make any sense to say what inflation predicts, except to say it predicts everything. And as the old saying goes, a scientific theory that predicts everything predicts nothing at all. Ironically, even Max Tegmark himself admitted that inflation sabotages our ability to make useful predictions. In fact, he stated that because of inflations, we physicists are no longer able to predict anything at all. Moreover, as if all that was not already bad enough, Tegmark's level 2 inflationary multiverse is now contradicted by the findings of Planck's. And although inflation has now been expanded to try to explain away the fine-tuning of the universe, as this graph from Tegmark's article illustrates, initially the main purpose of inflation theory, as far as I understand it, was only to try to simply explain why the universe is flat and smooth or homogeneous. Yet in inflation theory's abject failure to explain why the universe is so smooth and flat, or to predict anything else about the universe that is useful, it is interesting to note that the Bible successfully predicted the universe was to repeat flat, and also happened to predict that it would be round. And here are the verses that make that point clear. And here is an illustration of the microwave background where you can clearly see for yourself the circle of the universe. Tegmark then goes on to imagine a level 3 multiverse. A level 3 multiverse results from Everett's many-world interpretation of quantum mechanics. And in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, the reality of wave function collapse is denied. This denial of wave function collapse leads to an infinite number of parallel universes. As Philip Ball stated, you avoid the complications of wave function collapse, but at the expense of making another universe. Philip Ball is far from the only person to find the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics to be complete nonsense. These following quotes from leading scientists attest to that fact. Moreover, despite the fact that wave function collapse is denied in the many worlds interpretation, wave function collapse has now been experimentally demonstrated to be a real effect. Here's an article that makes that point clear. Tegmark also stated that the parallel universes postulated in the many worlds interpretation make their presence felt through quantum computation. He is simply mistaken in that belief. As the following article points out, the lethal problem for the contention that quantum computation proves many worlds is that you're not allowed to imagine that the world splits into many worlds as long as things are coherent before the qubits are measured. Only when the measurement is completed at the end of the Shor's algorithm calculation, you're allowed to imagine that the world split. But it's too late, because by that moment, the whole calculation has already been done in a single quantum world without any help from the parallel worlds. A more technical refutation of the many worlds interpretation involves irreconcilable difficulties it has with what are termed Born probabilities. Here are some papers and a video that goes over that technical refutation of many worlds. Of related interest, here is a recent video lecture by Dr. Bruce Gordon where he ably and very knowledgeably gives an excellent defense of the theistic position of what is termed idealism within quantum mechanics. Tegmark then goes on to imagine a level 4 multiverse. And Tegmark's level 4 multiverse, whatever is mathematically possible, is real as a universe or is real in some universe. According to this final and ultimate level 4 multiverse scenario of his, besides entire universes being based on whatever is mathematically possible, Tegmark holds himself to be nothing more than a consistent mathematical structure. In the following article, George Ellis remarks that Tegmark has argued that every consistent mathematical structure exists in some disconnected universe. Tegmark also believes that nothing else exists beyond the consistent mathematical structures. Tegmark is himself nothing more than a consistent mathematical structure. This is a view that assigns to mathematical structures a degree of agency that they are not otherwise thought to possess. And critique of Max Tegmark's 2015 book, Our Mathematical Universe, Sheldon Glashow, professor of mathematics and physics at Boston University, quips that I may be a blockhead, but I am certainly not a mathematical structure akin to a triangle. To refute Tegmark's belief that every consistent mathematical structure exists in some disconnected universe, I would like to introduce Tegmark to Kurt Gödel. Kurt Gödel has shown with his incompleteness theorems that no scientific cosmology, which of necessity must be highly mathematical, can have its proof of consistency within itself as far as mathematics go. In the absence of such consistency, all mathematical models fall inherently short of being that theory which shows in virtue of its a priori truth that the world can only be what it is and nothing else. This is true even if the theory happened to account for perfect accuracy for all phenomena of the physical world known at a particular time. To further clarify the devastating point about Gödel's incompleteness theorems in regards to Tegmark's hypothesized mathematical multiverse, David Goldman states that we cannot construct an ontology that makes God dispensable. Secularists can dismiss this as a mere exercise within the predefined rules of the game of mathematical logic, but that is sour grapes, for it was the secular side that hoped to substitute logic for God in the first place. Gödel's critique of the continuum hypothesis has the same implication as his incompleteness theorem. Mathematics will never create the sort of closed systems that sorts reality into neat boxes. Moreover, to further burst Tegmark's mathematical theory of everything bubble, Gregory Chaitin has now shown that an infinite number of true mathematical theorems exist that cannot be proved from any finite system of axioms. As far as Tegmark imagining that he is himself nothing more than a mathematical structure, it might further interest Tegmark to know that the way mathematicians provide their unassailable demonstrations of the truth of certain mathematical assertions is fundamentally non-algorithmic and non-computational. As well, since mathematical equations are by nature deterministic and therefore cannot clearly have free will, it might also interest Tegmark to know that creating new axioms in mathematics and free will are shown to be different aspects of the same phenomena, the creation of new information. In regards to Tegmark's belief that there is a single mathematical theory of everything which can potentially fit on a t-shirt and from which all science, engineering, sociology, psychology can be derived, I would like to point out that our universe is currently not described by a single overarching mathematical theory, but is now described by two very different overarching mathematical theories, general relativity and quantum mechanics respectively. Moreover, despite decades of extensive research by some of the brightest minds in the world, no one has ever been able to figure out a way to coherently unify those two overarching theories in a mathematically consistent way into the quote-unquote mathematical theory of everything. Moreover, if we rightly let the agent causality of God back into the picture of modern physics, as the Christian founders of modern science originally envisioned, instead of erroneously attributing agent causality to mathematical structures, as Tegmark inadvertently did, then an empirically backed reconciliation between quantum mechanics and general relativity, in other words, the theory of everything, readily pops out for us in Christ's resurrection from the dead. Specifically, we have evidence from the Shroud of Turin that both gravity and quantum mechanics were successfully dealt with in Christ's resurrection from the dead. You can see an overview of that evidence from the Shroud of Turin at the 23-minute mark of the following video. In other words, the theory of everything from which all science, engineering, sociology, and psychology can be derived is not to be found in any dead mathematical structure, as Tegmark imagined, but is to be found instead in the living Son of God, Jesus Christ. As proof would claim that all science, engineering, sociology, psychology can be derived from Christianity. In regards to modern science, I point to the fact that it just so happens modern science was born out of the Christian cultures of Europe by men who were, by and large, devoutly Christian in their beliefs. In regards to Christianity providing the foundation for engineering, I can point to the fact that since the 17th century, following directly on the heels of the founding of modern science, virtually all the major technological and engineering breakthroughs have occurred in the Christian West. And in further support for my claim that Christian theism lies at the basis of engineering, I can also point to the fact that even the simplest life on Earth, ever found on Earth is far more complex than any machine man has ever built or engineered through concerted effort. As to providing a basis for sociology, I can point to the fact that Christianity's tremendously positive impact on society at large, such as the invention of hospitals, universities, representative government, and the abolition of slavery, to name a few positive impacts that Christianity has had on society at large. As to providing a basis for psychology, I can point to the tremendously positive impact that Christianity has had on the psychological well-being of a countless number of people, myself included. Thus, to reiterate, the theory of everything from which all science, engineering, sociology, and psychology can be derived is not to be found within any dead mathematical structure, as Tegmark falsely imagined it would be found, but is instead to be found in the person of Jesus Christ, the living Son of God. Well, that is the end of the video. Thanks very much for watching. And again, I remind all videos and papers referenced in this video may be accessed in the link provided in the video description. Thanks again.